Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to The Politics Show. I'm Aran Dhillon, and today we're joined by Andrew England Kerr, one of the Brexit Party's new West Midlands MEPs. Andrew, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Brexit dominating the headlines day in, day out. What a time to enter politics. How has your short term in politics been so far?
An incredible experience. I mean, going to the European Parliament, mixing with a very different breed of politicians, the Brexit MEPs, an enlightening experience. If it finishes all in October, I will take back a very enriched experience.
And the prospect of a no-deal Brexit appears to be moving closer by the day. Do you acknowledge some of the concerns surrounding a no-deal Brexit, particularly the economic concerns?
Absolutely. Let's be quite frank. No one knows with absolute certainty what will happen on a no-deal Brexit. No one. So really, I like to try and look at the pure facts to begin with. We have in the UK the lowest unemployment we've had for 45 years. We've had more inward investment than Germany and France put together. So overall, our country's doing extremely well, especially if you consider it next to Greece, with a youth unemployment of 40%, Spain 30%, German economy edging to a recession, and the Eurobank is the index value is like the lowest it's been since the 2008 recession. So the euro is in, and the euro area, apart from the UK, is in deep area of deep concern. So, but overall, how do we get on? Well, even if we look at some of the top German economists for the Deutsche Bank, they think that Britain will do better outside. And we've also got the chief economists who designed the euro predicting the euro is going to collapse like a pack of cards. So in a way, the sooner we come out of it, the better, because we can protect ourselves. Because if you knew a company was going to fail or a person was going to go bankrupt, you wouldn't want to be guaranteeing their debt. And that's what the EU are trying to make us do in the withdrawal agreement, apart from many other things which would be bad. And quite honestly, I can say this, and you might be finding it surprising from a Brexit MEP, that if we were forced to accept any form of that withdrawal agreement that May cooked up, I'd rather we stay in the EU and we fight. So yes, it's a very important time in our country's history.
And there's also pressure mounting on the government for many for a second referendum as well. Would it be so wrong to have a second referendum to make sure that is what voters in the UK actually want?
There are arguments for and against, don't get me wrong, and I understand them. But it would be seen as a gross betrayal to many people. We were promised by the government this is a once-in-a-lifetime referendum. You're either in or you're out. And therefore, to go against that, you can understand it would cause so much deep resentment and a betrayal. And also a time when a lot of the British citizens were deeply mistrusting of politicians in general. We've had the paid for questions paid for, we've had the MP's expenses scandal, now this. I think confidence in politicians is rock bottom, and understandably so.
Do you think that's part of the reason why the Brexit Party did so well in the West Midlands? Because there are people like yourselves who haven't got a political background putting their names forward. Yeah,
I've never involved in politics, and if someone had said, Andrew, 10 months ago, I bet you £10,000 you're going to go into politics, I would have bitten their hand off. I would never believe. But you're right, we've brought in people that it's awoken the British citizens, I think. Because underlying, most people don't want to get involved in politics. They're worried about their jobs, their community, law and order. There are more important things in life. But this was something, when you're attacking our democratic beliefs, our democracy, which is fundamental, which we fought wars for, our parents. This was really important, and I think that's what's woken us. You've attacked the very nature of our what we believed our country stood for.
And being from a legal background and a non-existent political background, what do you personally believe that you can bring to being an MEP, however long you're in that role for?
Well, actual fact, my legal experience is counting for very, very little, quite honestly here. But I did have a degree in economics, and I've started up a number of businesses, and they had 2 Queen's Awards for enterprise. I've been chairman of a defence and industry committee in London. And it's really my economics and my business experience that is counting for something now, and that I'm really using it a lot. The legal expertise comes into analysing the documents that I'm being given. So I've got the thoroughness of the legal mind, but I'm using my business nous and my economics nous to try and wade through it.
An MEP's the yearly salary rate of almost £70,000. Do you think that's justified? Should MEPs be on that much money?
I think it's probably justified for our calibre of the Brexit MEPs you've got me, because we brought in some very proven people with a proven business experience, and the calibre that is probably justified, in all honesty. If you're doing the job, and you're doing the committees, you're analysing, and actual fact, value to the UK, if we get us to come out on the right terms and we save billions, then I think they've got a good deal out of us.
And will you be continuing to take up your seat in European Parliament from now until, however?
Absolutely. You know, at the end of the day, we got voted in. So people put the trust in us, not just sending a message. So we are, in my view, very morally committed and legally committed. Once we're in there, we must there to fight for the best of British interests, which is in really not just British interests in general, but it means British industry, British jobs.
And has it been anyway daunting to sort of get to grips with life in European Parliament?
Well, not in a way. It's a bit of a facade. If you want my own thing, it's these massive big buildings with vast sums of money poured in. But it's a charade, because as an MEPs, we can't invoke legislation, we can't revoke legislation, we can talk about it. In my humble opinion, that is no way to call a parliament. A parliament is a democratic process. So it doesn't matter how much money and how many chauffeur-driven cars you chuck at me, I think it's a sham.
And you briefly mentioned about people losing trust with politicians here, across the world as well, in many, many areas. What do you personally believe is the key to regaining that trust between the electorate and politicians?
Bottom line, they must deliver on what they say. They must mean what they say what they mean, and deliver on it. And that's probably where Boris Johnson has got the biggest challenge now. He said, do or die, we're going to leave on the 31st of October. If he doesn't deliver on that, he's going to be in serious trouble.
What were your initial views when Boris Johnson did become PM? Was that something you did welcome?
I do. Funny enough, you might find it strange, but I wish him the best. I really hope that he delivers on a no-deal Brexit and a clean Brexit, because then that's what we stood for. And that it really honours the referendum result, honours democracy, and we wish him all the best. But if he doesn't deliver, then he will find the Brexit Party snapping at his heels and giving him a living nightmare.
Do you think Theresa May had somewhat of an impossible task to deliver Brexit and please everyone? Well,
I think maybe she was impossible, but she shouldn't have taken up position. She was a Remainer, so she never had a heart in it. But bear in mind, also she had probably a civil service that were very much Remainers. You put the two together, you're into a perfect storm. I don't think she had a hope. She probably didn't really understand the withdrawal agreement that we understand from the Brexit, because we analyse it.
And how was life working under Nigel Farage? Must be an experience.
It is interesting. In actual fact, what you see with Nigel in private is what you get in public. He's a totally committed person. He can be very funny, but at the same time serious. So he is a very interesting thing. He's a great leader of any political party. I think would welcome him. And if you've got that real commitment in life, you know what he says. He may be Marmite, but you know what you get with him.
Mr. Farage, he has been quite friendly with US President Donald Trump as well in recent times, a man who's been accused of somewhat divisive and hateful comments. Personally, are you a fan of Donald Trump?
No, I mean, let me think. I think some of the comments Donald Trump has said, I bet he bitterly regrets never having said, especially about women and the demeaning comments. But what he has done for the US economy is beyond doubt. He's brought back business in, and he's increased the employment. So you can see his popularity in that sense. and he stood up for America. In the same way, we've got to have people who are going to stand up for the United Kingdom and protect our industry and protect our jobs. So I'm no overall great fan of him. I can appreciate what he has achieved, the good things for the United States, but I can see the downside.
And we've seen hate crime also increase in many areas as well across the UK since the EU referendum in 2016. Do you fear that's going to continue increasing those figures, or are you sort of quietly confident that we may see somewhat of a turn in years to come? Communities could become united once again?
I think it's really important, and I am deeply concerned. I'm deeply concerned at the rise of the intolerant attitude in politics. I think we should all be able to hold our beliefs, whether they're religious or political beliefs, in a safe environment. But to have a small minority at times attacking people, physically and verbally attacking people, is totally unacceptable. It's bad for politics, it's bad for the communities, but it needs people, especially the leaders of the political parties, to stand up and say, no, physical and verbal attacks are totally unacceptable. We are a liberal democracy, let us appreciate it, but let's have respect for other people's views. But it's something very close to my heart. I think we've got to do a lot better to learn. Especially Birmingham's a great example. We're a big multicultural society, and don't we relish it and are proud of it? And we can get by it, but I think some of the political politicians have got to get their act together and say no, and speak out when people are unacceptable conduct.
Mm-hmm. And if the UK is to leave on October the 31st, what does the future hold for the Brexit Party? Would it cease to exist?
Well, if we come out on a clean break, so we're not tied into a thing, then we have fulfilled our main role, and I'd be happy with that because we've stood up for democracy, and hopefully we set up Britain to prosper in the long term. So I, for one, would be really appreciate it. I can go back to being a normal businessman and hopefully a normal husband.
And as you say, the million-dollar question, who knows how long you will be an MEP for? But during that time, what are some of your biggest political ambitions and priorities?
Well, while I'm MEP, I want us to come out on the right terms. And if we can't get the right, we come out on a clean break, because I'm passionate about wanting to protect British jobs and British industry. And that's what I'm fearful of, that if we don't come out on the right terms. That's my sole thing. I honestly believe while you're standing as an MEP, you put your country first. This is about service to your country, not self-service. And if I can do that, then I'll be a very happy camper.
But still working, as you mentioned, it must be very, very difficult to be juggling work and life as a politician. How have you managed to do that?
Well, I'm a very early riser, so I'm often in my office for 7:30. I probably conk out quite early, but I've got a great, in the family companies, I've got a great team of people. So I've had to put most of the work onto them, and to allow me to concentrate on the MEP role.
And the family side of things as well, I'm sure it must be crucial to have that support from those who are closest to you. How have they been during your journey so far?
I'm really lucky. I've been married for a good number of years, and I like to think I'm happily married. I don't know if my wife would say the same thing, but I've got tremendous support from my wife, and that's so essential. Like anyone who's in business, they appreciate that most men would not be able to run a business often without a good lady or partner behind them.
And aside from Brexit, there could be a general election thrown into the mix as well. Do you think the UK really wants to see a general election?
I think it could be forced on the British public, right? Whether you like it or not, because we've got to look at it. Logically, Boris Johnson does not have the numbers to get a no deal through the House of Commons. He might try and force it through, but there's going to be real opposition. There could be really civil disorder coming out. You can see the logic for a general election, because they will stand on to get the mandate for whatever. And if the British public support him, oh be it. If the British public decide, no, we want a referendum, stay in, let the British public decide. I mean, I have actually fact a lot more confidence in the British public than some politicians do, because I don't think at the moment there is a serious disconnect, obviously, between the referendum result and the House of Commons, and that's what has annoyed a lot of people, and we need to have that resolved. I do fear that this could cause disunity and discontent for 10 or 15 years. But so be it. That might be the price we have to pay for democracy.
And if there was to be a general election in the not too distant future and the Brexit Party was to be involved in that, how many seats realistically do you think the Brexit Party could secure?
That's going to be, I don't think anyone can accurately answer that. I can't, because very much will depend on the circumstances. If Boris Johnson does not deliver on his do or die by the 31st of October, his confidence, his popularity and credibility will plunge, in which case the amount of Brexit MEPs could be quite considerable number. If he does deliver, then there, as you quite rightly pointed out, there is little purpose, role, potentially for the Brexit Party. And so that's the big question. We'd need a crystal ball for that.
Do you think we could see any, in a future election, could we see any deals between the Brexit Party and the Tories to ensure that rival candidates aren't placed in the same seats?
Well, you've got to be careful on that. It might seem a simple answer, oh yes, but you've got to bear in mind the Brexit Party is a very broad church. We have a lot of Labour Party, Liberal Party and Conservatives all part of it, even Communists. And so you can't say, oh well, we'll all switch vote. No, they will make their own decision up. However, in one sense, we've seen the Liberal Party and some of the other, Plaid Cymru, form alliances to contest a recent election, which they won through tactical voting. Therefore, logic dictates that if the Conservatives don't come to some form of alliance, the Corbyn could come in to power, which that fills a lot with horror. So, logically speaking, they should do something if he doesn't deliver a clean break.
Another key issue as well facing politicians is social media and the abuse aimed at politicians as well on social media. Are you on Facebook or Twitter? And I mean, have you experienced any form of abuse via those platforms?
Well, not too very much. Really, I've been very limited to it. But actual fact, Nigel Farage did give us one good tip. He said, don't look at it. And I think that's quite a good tip, because if you allowed a very vocal, nasty minority to intimidate you, it would stop you doing your job, what you honestly believe is right. And so I purposely don't look at it. We have some of the employees, and they will let me know if there's anything I need to go through, but I will just concentrate on trying to do my main job. But because it is a deep concern. I think it comes down to the assaults we've seen on candidates and supporters. And that's deeply worrying, as I said before. But I'm not intimidated. And I think also if you're elected, you have to take it.
Why do you think we've got to a stage in society where people aren't afraid to express those views on social media, but if you saw that person in the street, you probably wouldn't dream of saying those things to them? It's
too easy, isn't it? It's a bit of a coward's way out. But even so, it's not how I would advocate. I think you should be peaceful protest, peaceful disagreement, because that's the rule of the thugs, the fascists, the extremists, them win. And that's not right. And also, I think it also would put off a lot of decent people entering politics, especially the ladies.
Yeah.
Not being said, but they're going to be more intimidated by that. And we need a greater diversity of people in to encourage a higher standard in politics.
And speaking of diversity, at the minute in Parliament there are more black, Asian and minority ethnic MPs than ever before. Do you think there still needs to be a lot more done to improve diversity in UK Parliament, but also in European Parliament?
I think actually, in fact, it is quite surprising when you look at it now. There isn't the diversity in the European Parliament. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I came from a family. My father was a doctor who was in the Second World War. He was in Burma and India, mixed with the Indians and the Gurkhas. And unfortunately, the Brexit Party, I can honestly say I've never heard a racist or inappropriate comment. But I do, and I'm passionate that people should be treated totally equally. I don't care whether black, white, yellow with pink spots, whatever. It's how the people act that's important. But I think, especially in the European Parliament, they've got a lot to learn from how we conducted matters in the UK. We're much more tolerant and diverse. But you're right, you might be very surprised at the European Parliament. I think they're way behind the UK. They've got a lot to learn from us.
And another key issue facing society is that of climate change. There seems to be a lot of momentum sort of gaining on that campaign. Do you think we're doing enough to ensure?
It's really hard to say. You know, I'm not an expert on it, but if you only look back in past history, our deserts used to bloom. So there must be a natural form of climate change that takes place anyway. But the question is, are we accelerating it through our own mankind's conduct? That is the big issue. But we have to be very careful that we don't impose undue tariffs or restrictions on our industry, that we just end up buying in those products or services from countries that are not so have such restrictions, in which case then we've damaged our own economy. So there's a very careful balancing act. I would, however, be really keen to invest in British industry and our technology to bring the greener recycled industry and energy to us, like the solar panels. You know, why we shouldn't be trying to put them in on most houses. Let's start doing like that. That way, I'm really keen, because then we can invest in British industry at the same time go to the goal of less carbon footprint. There's a happy balance to be achieved, and an awful lot of work, but also a lot of opportunity in Britain. I mean, we've got the technology. We've just got to have a little bit more confidence in ourselves, invest in those industries that are going to bring us in, rather than buying the solar panels from outside.
Do you think we've missed somewhat of a trick there, not prioritising in making that investment years, even decades potentially earlier?
Without a shadow, like North Sea oil, we should have used a lot of that money to invest in the UK, into our industry, into modern technology, as a lot of the other countries with oil have done that. We've definitely way behind. Doesn't mean there's no excuse for not doing it. We just got to move up and get going a lot quicker and with a lot more passion, and cut through the red tape. You know, that's what I think I've learned from the Brexit Party MEPs, a lot of them, because they've been in business. You know, it's not a question, oh, we can't do it. No, how are we going to do it? It's a can-do attitude. And we're not going to let a few civil servants trying to waffle us. No, we know what we're talking about. Get on and do it.
And a lot of travelling for an MEP. For those who may be interested in going for that role in the future, what does a typical day involve for yourself, from the day you wake up to get into European Parliament?
Well, if I want to try and get them a Monday morning, and it might mean getting up at 3 to catch a 6 o'clock flight from Birmingham, or depending on the thing. So it's a long day, don't get me wrong, and often if you're going to meet up with people, then you're going to have a working dinner. So it is very time consuming. If you're going to do it properly, and do the committees, research your committee work, so you can ask informative questions. But as for an MEP, hopefully there will not be a role for people to take place in the future.
And what would you say has been the most challenging aspect of life as a member of European Parliament so far?
I think for me, it is being able to try and come up to the right standard. Because bear in mind, a lot of the Brexit MEPs, 30% are journalists. So when they give an interview, they're pretty polished. Listen, Nigel, they're good at it. Now, I'm a businessman, although with different things. To try and present that to a journalist is a very different matter. I've had to try and learn very, very quick, because A, I don't want to let down the party, and I want to give a proper informative response. So that has been my biggest challenge. But actual fact, the more you do and the more committed you are, then it's not too unduly difficult, but you've got to be prepared to always try and improve. That's my biggest challenge so far. So yes.
Yeah. And with Brexit, as I mentioned, dominating headlines day in, day out, do you fear that there's somewhat of a chance we're missing sight of some of the other key issues, for example, homelessness, social care, housing developments, that aren't potentially getting some of the coverage which they deserve purely because Brexit is dominating everything?
Absolutely. And you've got to bear in mind, you know, we've had a shuffle of a whole lot of ministers. So naturally, the ministers, with the best will in the world, can't get a handle on their own ministry. Although I have to question, really, you know, most ministers seem to stay for 6 or 12 months. I don't think most politicians who haven't had industry experience or business experience of making major decisions, it can do it. I think you find most of it is run by the civil servants, which is a different issue, I have to say, and I have my deep concerns on some of that. But you're right, we've taken the eye off the ball on a lot of things because there's only so many hours in a day, and we've got major problems facing this country, knife crime especially, the elderly and the homeless. Those are things that we can solve with the right determination, without a shadow of doubt, and we need to get it back in place.
That's all for today. Andrew, thank you for coming on to the show. It's been great to have you on, and good luck for the rest of your term as an MEP.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone at home for watching. That's all for today, but make sure to tune in next time for the Politics Show. Vaiguru ji ka khalsa, Vaiguru ji ki fateh.